Alright, so we are ready to begin our next lesson. Today's learning goal is that students will be able to divide using a one-digit divisor. So we're going to go ahead and review some terminology first. The first term we need to review is quotient. The quotient is the answer to a division problem. The second term is a dividend. The dividend is the number being divided. The third term is the divisor, and the divisor is the number dividing into the dividend. You can think of it as the number of pieces that we're dividing the dividend into. And then the remainder is any value that's left over after we use the subtraction step. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So if we have an example, 32 divided by 8 is equal to 4. We can write that in long division and it looks like this. And 32 is the dividend. That's what we're dividing. That's the number we're trying to break up. The divisor tells us that we're going to divide it into 8 pieces. And the quotient tells us that there will be 4 items in each of the parts. So we have a few steps that we need to do when we're doing long division. And we're going to use the phrase, does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers, to help us remember those steps. So the D stands for divide. So we're going to ask ourselves, how many times will the divisor divide into the first digit of the dividend? If it's 0 times, that means it won't go in at least once. Then we're going to go over to the first 2 digits of the dividend and see how many times that it will divide into those. After we find out how many times it'll divide into it, we're going to multiply that digit times the divisor. We're going to take that answer and subtract it from what we divided into. We're going to get an answer from that subtraction problem, and we're going to check and make sure that that number is less than the divisor. If it's not less than the divisor, then we have to go back and find a different value for the first step in division. And then the final step, the B, is to bring down the next digit in the dividend. And we keep repeating this, so we're going to do this over and over and over again until there's nothing left to bring down. And once we do that, then we're ready to find our final solution. So we're going to do a sample problem, and the sample problem that we're going to do is 125 divided by 8. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've written the problem down, 125 divided by 8. The first thing we do is divide. Does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? So we're going to divide. We look at 8 in the first digit in the dividend. We say, does 8 go into 1? No, 8 is bigger than 1, and so it can't go into it. So then we look at the first 2 digits in the dividend and say, can 8 go into 12? And we find out, yes, that can happen. It can go into it 1 time. Then we go to the second step. The second step is multiplication. We multiply the digit that's up here, the first digit in our answer, times the divisor, and then we're going to place it directly underneath that number. So we're going to multiply 1 times 8, which is 8, and then we're going to write it straight down underneath. It's important that we make sure we keep all of our numbers lined up correctly so that we can get the correct final solution. Our next step is to subtract. In this case, we're going to subtract 12 minus 8 12 minus 8 is 4. The fourth step is to check. We're going to check this number and see if it is less than the divisor. So we look and we say 4 is less than 8, so we're ready to move on. If it wasn't, then we would have to change this number up here at the top. The next step is to bring down the next number in the dividend. In this case, we're going to bring down the 5. Now we're ready to start over again, so we're going to divide. This time we're going to check to see how many times does the 8 go into 45. So we look and we say, well, 8 goes into 45 5 times. And then we multiply the second step. 5 times 8 is 40. Then we do the third step and we subtract again. 5 minus 0 is 5. 4 minus 4 is 0. And so we're left with a 5. The next step is to check. Is 5 less than 8? Yes, it is. So we're ready to move on. And the final step is to bring down. Well, there's nothing left to bring down. And so this piece down here, that's the remainder. That's what's left over because we can't divide 8 into 125 evenly. So the way we notate that is we put a little r up here for remainder, and then we put the 5 up here. So our final solution is 15 with a remainder of 5. All right, so we're going to do our next example. Our next example is we have 4,236 divided by 5. Okay, so we're going to start this off the same way we started the other problem. We're going to write the dividend inside the division house. We're going to put the 5 outside the division house. We're going to start with does or divide. How many times does 5 go into 4? Well, 5 is bigger than 4, so it doesn't go into it. So we need to move to the next digit, and so we need to say how many times does 5 go into 42? Well, 5 goes into 42 8 times. The next step is to divide or to multiply, sorry. So we're going to multiply the 8 times the 5, and the answer is 40, and we're going to put the ones place directly underneath the number that we just placed up here in the solution. So we're going to put 40. The next step is to subtract. 2 minus 0 is 2. 4 minus 4 is 0. The next step is to check. We're going to check to see, is the 2 less than the 5? It is. And so we're ready to move to the next step, which is bring down. So we bring down the 3. Ready to start over? How many times does 5 go into 23? Well, it goes into it 4 times. The next step is to multiply. We're going to multiply the 4 times the 5 and get 20. The next step is to subtract. 3 minus 0 is 3. 2 minus 2 is 0. We check to see, is the 3 less than 5? It is. So we're ready to move to the next digit and bring it down. And so we have 36. So we start over again. How many times does 5 go into 36? Well, it goes into it 7 times. We multiply 7 times 5, and that gives us 35. And again, we put the ones place underneath the number that we just placed. The next step is to subtract. 6 minus 5 is 1. 3 minus 3 is 0. We check to see, is the 1 less than the 5? Yes, it is. So we bring down. Well, there's nothing left to bring down, so that means we're done with this part of the problem. And all we have to do is write the remainder. In this case, the remainder is 1. All right, well, that is the end of our practice problems. Go ahead and check on Moodle and do the 3 practice problems that are for tonight's homework. Make sure you enter those answers into Moodle to check to make sure that you got them correct. After you complete the practice problems, rate yourself on our scale and write that next to the heading in your notes. If you have any questions, please bring those questions to class tomorrow, and I'll be happy to answer them. That's it, so have a great evening.